Alright, I finally saw a new film, Masters of the Universe, and let me tell you what, I don't have any history with He-Man and the source materials around him. And so when I watched the trailer, I was like, okay, this could either be amazing or this could easily bombed, because it is fantasy, and sure, fantasy could be entertaining, and for those of who watched He-Man when they were kids, they could finally relieve that nostalgic factor, but I didn't have that, so I approached this film as a regular fantasy film. And after I saw the trailer, I really get that in mind. I set it in, and I set my expectation to be just realistic. And then I watched the film, and to me, this film is ridiculously bad. Because let's face it, this film starts out as a fish out of water storyline. Because He-Man doesn't know that he is He-Man. He knows himself as Adam. He has history with, this methods, this He-Man methods, but he doesn't really believe himself to be He-Man, and he just wants to go home to his kingdom and reclaim his kingdom, because his kingdom is now throned by Skeletor, played by Jared Leto, and Nicholas Gladson. He is amazing as He-Man. His performance is cool, alright, but the way he was written is miserable, alright, because he is written as this jokey, ridiculous character, and I don't think that the He-Man from the animated series, sure, he was campy, he was corny, he was hilarious at times, but I feel like that's not 100% his personality. Whereas here in the film, he was just 90% throwing jokes around. And the jokes that he throws here are ridiculous, and it doesn't make me laugh at all, actually. And to me, that is miserable to watch, alright? And also, as I mentioned before, it started as a fish out of water storyline, and it kind of drags, man. The first act of this film is filled with jokes, and it drags in the, normal world that we live in. Whereas in the cartoon, it was more focused on the, the kingdom and the fairy tale aspects of He-Man. So I feel like this film was trying to do what Superman did for Superman, but of course do it with He-Man. Is that, they prioritize his humanity beyond his power, above his power. And I think as a concept, that's fine. But actually, He-Man got nerfed so long in this film, right? For the first act and half of the second act, he doesn't really have anything to do, anything cool, to do any action. And for me, it is really draggy. The pacing is way off. And the chemistry between Nicholas Gladson and Teela, the princess, it was basically non-existent, and it is built around this ridiculous moment. And the one thing that bugs me about the dialogues in this film is that it really rarely attempts to be emotional, because when you're making a fantasy film or whatever genre the film is, it's supposed to have some sort of an emotional spine in the center of the movie, but this film doesn't have any of it. It tries to do it a couple of times, it misses the mark miserably. Alright? The only thing that I think worked in the whole film was Jared Leto as Skeletor, because when you see Skeletor, you don't see Jared Leto at all, because he was entirely built in CGI, and it was the best way to do it. Alright, and his performance is menacing. When he needs to be funny, sure, he can be hilarious at times, but the hilarious aspect wasn't forced. Whereas with He-Man, the character of He-Man, I feel like they forced the comedic parts for way too long because he was throwing jokes everywhere and the jokes didn't really land. Alright, so the one thing that I compare this film to is to Thor Ragnarok, but this film was way more ridiculous than Thor Ragnarok. It's not in the same level as Thor Love and Thunder. Alright, it's not that kind of comedic, but still, it has a lot of, cringy jokes thrown in there, and the pacing was off. And I feel like there is a good film under this mess, And I mean, sure, there's action here and there, but none of the action stands out at all. The boss fight between He-Man and Skeletor was kind of alright, but I was expecting more. So, I will give Masters of the Universe a 5 out of 10. If you're a fan of the Masters of the Universe, you should definitely check this one out and tell me what you think. For me, this film was kind of mid. Even though I didn't have any backstory with the character of He-Man, I still had a little bit more expectation. And the final product kind of disappointed me in that. So I will give He-Man a 5 out of 10. And tell me everything you like about this film, man. Because yes, there's still some redeeming qualities to it, but it is buried beneath this generic comedic film that doesn't really need to be comedic, So 5 out of 10, and see you on the next video.